They say every empire has a foundation, but what happens when that foundation walks away and takes everything with it? My name is Elena Cross, and for 3 years I was married to one of the most powerful men in Silicon Valley, Victor Hale. Billionaire, tech genius, narcissist. To the world, he was unstoppable. To me, he was the man who erased my existence while I stood right beside him. This is the story of how I went from invisible to inevitable, how I destroyed a billionaire without raising my voice, and how one night at a luxury gala changed everything. Stay with me until the end and comment which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The first time Victor Hale told me I was embarrassing him, we'd been married exactly 47 days. I remember because I'd been counting. Not in anticipation of some anniversary or celebration. No, I was counting survival. Each day that passed felt like another small betrayal of the woman I used to be. We were at a charity auction in downtown San Francisco. One of those glittering events where the wealthy gather to throw money at causes they'll forget by morning, all while photographing their generosity for social media. I'd spent 3 hours getting ready that evening, choosing a dress I thought Victor might actually notice, a deep emerald that brought out the gold flecks in my brown eyes, something elegant but not attention-seeking. I thought I'd done well. I thought wrong. "What the hell are you wearing?" Victor had hissed as we stepped out of the limousine, his smile plastered on for the cameras while his words cut into me like glass. "You look like you're trying to compete with the actual guests." I felt my face flush hot with shame. Around us, photographers called out his name, flashes exploding in the night. Victor waved, that practiced smile never faltering, while his hand gripped my elbow hard enough to bruise. "Victor, we'll discuss this later. Just stay quiet. Don't embarrass me further." And just like that, I became invisible. That was 3 years ago, and I'd been invisible ever since. People always ask me the same question when they finally learn the truth. Why did you stay? As if love were simple. As if marriage were a logical equation you could solve with pros and cons. As if leaving a billionaire were as easy as walking out the door. They don't understand that Victor Hale didn't just have money. He had power, influence, an army of lawyers who could make problems disappear and create new ones from nothing. He had connections that reached into every corner of the tech world, the financial sector, even government offices. Cross him, and you didn't just lose, you ceased to exist in any way that mattered. But there was another reason I stayed, one I kept buried so deep that sometimes even I forgot it was there. I was building something he knew nothing about, something that would eventually consume everything he'd built. I just needed time. Our penthouse overlooked the San Francisco Bay from the 47th floor of the Millennium Tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist designer furniture, art pieces worth more than most people's homes. It was the kind of place you see in architectural magazines, all clean lines and carefully curated emptiness. It felt like living in a museum, beautiful and completely devoid of life. I stood at those windows most mornings, watching the fog roll across the water while Victor worked in his home office, or while he was already gone to his downtown headquarters, or while he was still asleep next to Madeline Frost in whatever hotel they'd chosen that week. Yes, I knew about Madeline. Everyone knew about Madeline. She was Victor's executive vice president of strategic operations, which was a fancy title that meant she stood next to him at press conferences, looking brilliant and capable, while I stayed home looking invisible. Tall, blonde, sharp as a knife, and just as cutting. She had an MBA from Harvard and a smile that could freeze blood. The tech blogs called them a power couple. The gossip sites speculated endlessly about their relationship. And Victor? Victor did absolutely nothing to discourage it. "It's good for business," he told me once, the only time I'd gathered enough courage to confront him about the rumors. "People like a story. Madeline and I give them one." "And what am I?" I'd asked, my voice barely a whisper. He'd looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something flicker in his eyes, not quite contempt, not quite pity, something worse, indifference. "You're my wife, Elena. That's a private matter. Business is public. Learn the difference." I learned. I learned to smile at charity events while photographers ignored me to capture Victor and Madeline. I learned to sit at dinner parties where powerful people asked Victor about his beautiful companion while I sat 3 seats away. I learned to introduce myself as Elena and watch eyes glaze over with disinterest, only to light up when they made the connection to Victor. I learned to be nobody while married to somebody. But here's what Victor never learned about me. I'd been somebody long before I met him, and I was quietly becoming someone far more powerful than he could imagine. My mornings had a rhythm, a routine I'd perfected over 3 years of invisible existence. 6 a.m. Wake before Victor. Make coffee he never thanked me for. 6:30. Listen to him take calls while pacing the penthouse in his silk pajamas, barking orders at executives in Tokyo or London or wherever his empire currently demanded attention. 7. Watch him leave without a goodbye, sometimes without even acknowledging I was in the room. 7:15. Transform. See, Victor thought I spent my days doing whatever wealthy wives do: spa appointments, shopping, lunch with other invisible women. He'd given me credit cards and expected that to be enough. Expected me to be content with financial comfort and social irrelevance. He never asked what I actually did with my time, and I never told him. At 7:15 every morning, I descended to the parking garage, got into my own car, a modest Audi I'd bought with my own money, not his, and drove across the city to a converted warehouse in the Mission District. The building didn't look like much from the outside. Weathered brick, industrial windows, a door that needed painting. No sign, no indication of what happened inside. That was intentional. I'd bought the property 2 years before I met Victor, back when I was Elena Vasquez, recent graduate of the Fashion Institute of Design, drowning in student debt but absolutely certain of my purpose. The warehouse was my dream. A design studio, a workshop, a place where I could create without limitation. It was also where I became V. The name had started as a signature, just the first letter of my maiden name scrawled on design sketches. But it evolved into something more, an identity, a brand, a mystery. In the exclusive world of high fashion, anonymity was power. Designers who revealed themselves became subject to criticism, comparison, the brutal machinery of public opinion. But a ghost? A cipher? Someone who communicated only through their work? That became legend. My first major piece had been a wedding dress commissioned by a tech CEO's daughter. She'd found my early portfolio online, loved the aesthetic, clean lines with unexpected organic elements, structure that somehow felt alive. The wedding made headlines and the dress made more. People wanted to know who designed it. I said nothing. Signed it only with V. The mystery created demand. Demand created value. Value created opportunity. Within 2 years, V had dressed Oscar winners and royal family members, had designs featured in Vogue and Harper's Bazaar without ever giving an interview, had become the most sought-after fashion architect in the world while remaining completely unknown. And then I met Victor Hale at a fundraiser, and everything became complicated. I'd attended that fundraiser specifically to meet him, though he never knew that. Victor was already making waves in the tech world with his artificial intelligence platform, and I'd read that he was looking to expand into lifestyle brands. Fashion seemed like a natural progression: tech-integrated clothing, smart fabrics, the fusion of silicon and silk. I thought we could be partners, collaborators. I thought I'd found someone who would understand ambition because he embodied it. Instead, I found someone who collected beautiful things and kept them in gilded cages. Our courtship was intense, overwhelming, the kind of whirlwind romance that feels like destiny until you realize it was just momentum. Victor pursued me with the same focused intensity he brought to hostile takeovers. Expensive dinners, weekend trips to his house in Napa, conversations that lasted until dawn about changing the world. He was brilliant, I won't deny that. His mind worked like a supercomputer, making connections others missed, seeing possibilities in impossible places. When he focused that intelligence on you, it felt like standing in sunlight after years of shadow. I fell hard, fell fast, fell without looking at the ground rushing up to meet me. We married 6 months after we met, in a private ceremony at his Napa estate. Small, intimate, perfect. I wore a dress I'd designed myself, though I told no one that detail. Victor said I looked like a dream. He said I was everything he'd been searching for. He said a lot of things that turned out to be performance. The first crack appeared on our honeymoon in the Maldives. We were having dinner on a private beach, candles flickering in the sand, when Victor's phone rang. He answered immediately, a call from Madeline about some crisis in the Tokyo office. He talked for 40 minutes while our food grew cold, and I sat watching the tide come in. "Sorry about that," he said when he finally hung up, not sounding sorry at all. "Business never sleeps." "Neither do marriages," I'd replied, trying to keep my tone light. He'd smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You'll learn to understand, Elena. This is what being married to me means. The company comes first. It has to." That should have been my warning. That should have been the moment I recognized the truth. But I was in love, or thought I was, which amounts to the same blindness. The cracks widened after we returned to San Francisco. Victor became consumed with the new acquisition, spending 18-hour days at the office. I tried to be understanding, tried to be the supportive wife. I'd cook dinner that went uneaten, plan date nights that got canceled, initiate conversations that died in monosyllables. And slowly, I began to notice things. The way his phone was suddenly password protected when it never had been before. The late-night emergency meetings that always seemed to involve Madeline. The photos in tech magazines showing them at conferences together, standing just a little too close. The way he stopped touching me unless cameras were present. I confronted him once, only once, about 6 months into our marriage. I'd found receipts for a hotel suite in the city. We lived in the city, we had a penthouse. Why would he need a hotel room? "Are you sleeping with her?" I asked, my voice shaking but clear. Victor looked up from his laptop with an expression of such profound annoyance that I actually took a step back. "Elena, I don't have time for insecurity. Madeline is essential to my business. We work closely together. If you can't handle that, that's your issue, not mine." "You didn't answer my question." "I don't dignify paranoid accusations with answers." He returned his attention to his screen. "We're done with this conversation." And we were. Because that's how Victor operated, by declaration, by dismissal, by the simple act of deciding what was and wasn't worthy of his attention. I stopped being worthy of his attention, but I didn't stop being worthy of my own. Bum. My studio in the Mission became my sanctuary, my secret, my second life. While Victor thought I was shopping on Union Square or having lunch with other neglected wives, I was cutting patterns and draping fabric and building an empire he knew nothing about. My assistant, Maria, was the only person who knew both sides of my life. She'd been with me since before Victor, a brilliant design student I'd mentored who became my right hand. Late 20s, fierce loyalty, absolutely no patience for masculine ego. "He still doesn't know?" she'd asked one morning about 6 months ago, watching me sketch a new collection. "Still doesn't know." "Elena." She'd put down the fabric she was steaming and looked at me directly. "Why are you protecting him? Why keep this secret?" I'd considered the question carefully. "I'm not protecting him. I'm protecting this." I gestured around the studio, at the designs, the unfinished pieces, the vision board covered in concepts and dreams. The moment Victor knows about V, everything changes. He'll want to own it, control it, integrate it into his portfolio like another acquisition. "So you're just going to hide forever?" "No." I'd met her eyes, feeling something hard and determined settle in my chest. "I'm going to wait, build, become so powerful that when I finally reveal myself, there's nothing he can do but watch." Maria had smiled then, sharp and approving. "That's cold, boss. I like it." It was cold. I knew that. But 3 years of being invisible had frozen something inside me, turned the soft romantic who'd believed in love into something harder, more calculating, something dangerous. The weeks leading up to the luxury gala were particularly brutal. Victor was stressed about the event. It was the social occasion of the year, attended by every major player in tech, finance, and international business. The kind of event where deals worth billions got made over champagne and whispered conversations. His company was preparing to go public, and this gala was essentially his coronation as tech royalty. Everything had to be perfect, which meant I had to be invisible. "I've selected a dress for you," he announced one evening, 3 weeks before the event. He didn't ask if I wanted his input. He never asked. He'd had his assistant send over a garment bag. Inside was a dress in the most depressing shade of gray I'd ever seen. Shapeless, conservative, designed to blend into wallpaper. It looked like something a maiden aunt might wear to a funeral. This? I'd held it up, unable to hide my shock. It's appropriate, Victor said without looking up from his tablet. You'll be seated with the other spouses during dinner. I need you to look suitable. Suitable. Not beautiful, not striking. Suitable. That's when I knew exactly what I was going to do. I called Maria that night from the bathroom, the only place in the penthouse I was certain wasn't monitored by Victor's smart home system. I need you to make me a dress, I said quietly. For the gala? Her voice crackled with excitement through the phone. Please tell me you're ditching the gray monstrosity. I'm ditching everything, the gray dress, the invisible wife routine, all of it. I looked at myself in the mirror, really looked, maybe for the first time in months. I want midnight blue. I want structure and movement. I want every eye in that room on me. Elena, Maria's voice turned serious. If you do this, there's no going back. Victor will lose his mind. I know. He'll retaliate. You know how he is. I know. And you're doing it anyway? I smiled at my reflection, and the woman looking back at me wasn't the invisible wife anymore. She was someone else, someone Victor had created through neglect and was about to meet for the first time. I'm doing it anyway. Maria and I worked on the dress in secret over the next 3 weeks. It was some of my finest work, midnight blue silk that seemed to shift and shimmer in the light, cut to emphasize every curve while maintaining perfect elegance. The back was the masterpiece, an intricate design that looked like frozen water, like crystals forming in real time, flowing down the spine in a cascade of impossible detail. It was unmistakably a V original. My signature style was woven into every seam. You know people will recognize this, Maria said as she made the final adjustments. Fashion editors, designers, anyone who follows V's work. They'll know. I'm counting on it. And when they ask who designed it, I met her eyes in the studio mirror. I'll tell them the truth. The morning of the gala, Victor was already stressed. He'd barely slept, spent the night pacing and taking calls, barking orders about the event setup, the guest list, the seating arrangements. He was so consumed with orchestrating his perfect night that he didn't even ask what I was wearing. He assumed I'd obey. He assumed I'd wear the gray dress and blend into the background and play my role as the invisible wife. He assumed wrong. I got ready at the studio. Hair swept up in an elegant chignon, makeup dramatic but precise, dark eyes, red lips, confidence painted on like armor. When Maria helped me into the dress, I heard her gasp. Elena, you look dangerous, I suggested, like a queen going to war. I studied myself in the full-length mirror. She was right. The dress transformed me, or maybe it just revealed what had been hidden all along. The woman staring back wasn't invisible, wasn't erasable, wasn't someone you could dismiss or ignore. She was someone you noticed, someone you remembered, someone who could walk into a room and change everything. Are you scared? Maria asked. I considered the question. 3 years ago, the answer would have been yes. 3 years of being nobody while married to somebody had taught me fear, caution, the survival instinct of making myself small, but I wasn't that woman anymore. No, I said, and meant it. I'm done being scared. My phone buzzed. The car service Victor had arranged was waiting outside. He'd sent a driver for me separately, of course. Wouldn't want to arrive together like an actual couple. I took one last look in the mirror, one last deep breath, and walked out of the studio. By the time I walked back in, everything would be different. The gala was being held at the Legion of Honor Museum, a stunning Beaux-Arts building overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge. As my car pulled up to the entrance, I could see the red carpet, the photographers, the controlled chaos of San Francisco's elite gathering for their annual display of wealth and influence. Victor would already be inside, working the room with Madeline at his side, playing the part of the visionary CEO while his actual wife arrived alone, unremarked upon, invisible as always. Except tonight, I wasn't going to be invisible. I stepped out of the car, and the first camera flash went off almost immediately. Then another, and another. The photographers, initially focused on a tech executive I didn't recognize, suddenly swung their attention toward me. I could see the confusion on their faces. Who was this woman in the stunning dress? Someone they should recognize. A celebrity they'd somehow missed on the guest list? Miss!
Miss? Who are you wearing? One of them called out. I smiled, channeling every ounce of confidence I'd built in secret over 3 years. This is an original V piece, I said clearly, my voice carrying across the crowd. The reaction was immediate. Murmurs rippled through the photographers and the nearby guests. V was legendary in fashion circles. Mysterious, exclusive, impossible to book unless you had serious connections and even more serious money. Is V here tonight? Another photographer asked, cameras clicking frantically. You could say that, I replied, and walked past them into the museum. Behind me, I heard the whispers starting, heard the speculation, heard my name, Elena Cross, being repeated with a question mark, as if people were trying to remember where they knew it from. Mrs. Victor Hale. That's where they knew it from. The invisible wife. Not invisible anymore.
The museum's main hall had been transformed into something between an art gallery and a fantasy. Massive floral arrangements, strategic lighting that made the classical architecture feel modern and alive. Tables set with precision that would make a military general proud. Everything perfect, everything controlled. Very Victor. I accepted a champagne flute from a passing waiter and scanned the room. There, near the center, surrounded by a cluster of important-looking people, was Victor. And right beside him, like always, was Madeline. She saw me first. I watched her eyes widen slightly, saw her lean toward Victor and whisper something. He turned, scanning the crowd, and when his gaze landed on me, I saw his face go through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, recognition, shock. And then, finally, anger. He excused himself from his conversation and started walking toward me, Madeline trailing behind him like a shadow. I stood my ground, sipping champagne, waiting. What the hell are you wearing? Victor's voice was low, controlled, but I could hear the fury underneath. Good evening to you too, darling, I said pleasantly. You look stressed. Big night? I sent you a dress, a specific dress. Why aren't you wearing it? Oh, that gray thing? It didn't quite suit me. I smiled at Madeline, who was staring at my dress with an expression I couldn't quite read. Surprise? Envy? Fear? Madeline, you look lovely. Is that Valentino? Dior, she said automatically, still staring. Victor grabbed my elbow, his grip tight. We need to talk, now. Actually, I think we need to mingle. Isn't that the point of these events? I pulled my arm free, refusing to wince at the pressure. You go network with your important friends. I'll just circulate, like a proper wife. I walked away before he could respond, moving deeper into the crowd. Behind me, I heard Madeline say something to Victor, but I didn't look back. I was done looking back.
Backstage.
The whispers followed me through the room. I could feel eyes on me, hear fragments of conversation as I passed. Is that V? Who is she? That dress is incredible. Wait, isn't that Victor Hale's wife? Every time someone approached me, every time I was drawn into conversation, I felt myself becoming more real, more present, as if 3 years of invisibility were dissolving with each interaction, each moment where someone actually saw me. A tech journalist named Sarah Chen cornered me near the champagne fountain. I knew her work, sharp, insightful, willing to ask the questions others avoided. Mrs. Hale, she said, her eyes bright with curiosity. That dress is stunning. V doesn't usually work with clients in the tech world. How did you secure a commission? This was the exact moment where I could continue the lie, could maintain the separation between Elena Cross and V, could keep my secret safe for just a little longer, or I could burn it all down. I met her eyes steadily. I didn't need to secure a commission. I designed it myself. Sarah's expression shifted from polite interest to sharp focus. You... what? I'm V, I said clearly, calmly. I've always been V. The people nearby had gone quiet, listening. I could feel the moment expanding, could feel the information spreading like ripples across water. Someone was recording on their phone. Someone else was already typing furiously, probably tweeting. Sarah recovered quickly, her journalist instincts kicking in. "Can you confirm that? Do you have any proof?" I smiled. "Check the signature. Every V piece has one, a specific stitch pattern in the inner seam, invisible unless you know where to look. This dress has it. So does the wedding dress from the Nakamura ceremony last year. So does the gown Lupita Nyong'o wore to the Oscars, because I made all of them." "Why the secrecy?" "Because anonymity is power," I said simply. "And because I learned early that sometimes the best way to build an empire is to do it where no one's watching." Sarah was already texting someone, probably her editor. "This is going to be huge. Does Victor know?" I glanced across the room to where my husband stood, his face a mask of forced calm as someone clearly showed him a phone screen. As I watched, his eyes found mine across the crowded hall. "He does now," I said. Jamte. What would you do if you discovered your spouse had been hiding a secret empire from you? How would you react if the person you dismissed as irrelevant turned out to be worth more than you could imagine? And what happens when a billionaire realizes that the foundation of his perfect life is about to walk away and take everything with it? The night was just beginning, and Victor Hale's perfect world was about to shatter in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. Victor's face had gone from tan to pale to flushed red in the span of 30 seconds. Elena watched him excuse himself from his conversation and begin cutting through the crowd toward her, his movements sharp and deliberate. Madeline followed 2 steps behind, her expression unreadable, but her posture tense. Elena took another sip of champagne and turned back to Sarah Chen, who was still processing the revelation with the quick efficiency of a seasoned journalist. "How long have you been designing under the V name?" Sarah asked, her phone already recording. 8 years. I started in graduate school." "And Victor never knew?" "Victor never asked." Elena kept her voice even, matter of fact. "He knew I had a background in fashion design. He assumed I'd given it up when we married. I simply never corrected that assumption." "That's—" Sarah started, but Victor arrived before she could finish. "Elena." His voice was tight, controlled, the tone he used in board meetings when someone had made an unforgivable error. "A word, now." Sarah's eyes gleamed with professional interest, but Elena touched her arm gently. "Excuse me for just a moment." She set down her champagne glass and followed Victor toward a quieter corner of the hall, near a marble sculpture of some Greek goddess whose name Elena couldn't remember. The moment they were out of immediate earshot, Victor's control cracked. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed, his hand gripping her wrist. "You just told that journalist you're V? Do you have any idea what you've done?" Elena looked down at his hand on her wrist, then back up at his face. "I told her the truth. Something you might try occasionally. This is my night, Elena. Mine. I've spent months orchestrating this event, and you decide to pull this stunt?" "Stunt?" She pulled her wrist free, and this time she didn't hide the anger in her voice. "I wore a dress I designed to an event I was invited to as your wife. The only thing that makes it a stunt is your reaction. You told people you're V. You made yourself the story." I answered a question honestly. If that overshadows you, maybe you should ask yourself why your wife's honesty is more interesting than your achievements. Victor's jaw clenched. Around them, people were pretending not to watch, while absolutely watching. Elena could see phones pointed in their direction, could practically feel the social media posts being composed in real time. "We're leaving," Victor said flatly. "You're welcome to leave. I'm staying." "Elena." "Mr. Hale!" A jovial voice interrupted them. A tall man with silver hair and a tuxedo that probably cost more than a luxury car approached with an extended hand. "Richard Sterling, I don't believe we've been properly introduced, though I've certainly heard a great deal about your work." Victor's expression smoothed instantly into his public face, though Elena could see the effort it took. "Mr. Sterling, of course. Your reputation precedes you." Richard Sterling was a legend in international finance, a billionaire who'd made his fortune in currency trading and had since diversified into everything from real estate to tech startups. He was known for being ruthless in business and unexpectedly charming in person, someone who could smile while he dismantled your company piece by piece. And this must be your wife. Richard turned to Elena, his blue eyes sharp and assessing. Though I'm told I should call you V now. Elena is fine, she said, accepting his handshake. His grip was firm, confident, the handshake of someone who'd negotiated with world leaders. That dress is extraordinary. I recognized the style immediately. I bought my daughter a V-piece for her wedding last year. Cost me a fortune, but worth every penny. He smiled. I had no idea I was funding the wife of a competitor. Elena isn't part of my business, Victor said quickly. She has her own separate interests. Separate? Richard's eyebrows rose. How modern of you, though I imagine those interests are quite lucrative. V's brand valuation must be substantial by now. Elena saw Victor's eye twitch. He had no idea about her brand valuation, had never asked, never cared to know. The realization that Richard Sterling, someone Victor desperately wanted to impress, knew more about his own wife's business than he did was clearly eating him alive. We keep our finances separate, Victor said, his smile rigid. Wise in this day and age. Richard's attention remained on Elena. Tell me, have you ever considered expanding into smart fabrics? The integration of technology and fashion seems like an obvious evolution for someone with your vision. Actually, that's something I've been exploring, Elena said. Fabrics that respond to temperature, clothing that monitors health metrics without being obtrusive. The challenge is making it beautiful as well as functional. Exactly. Function without beauty is engineering. Beauty without function is art. But both together, that's innovation. Richard pulled out his phone. I'm hosting a small gathering next week, investors interested in the intersection of fashion and technology. You should come. Present your ideas. She's not looking for investors, Victor cut in. Both Elena and Richard turned to look at him. The silence stretched for 3 long seconds. I wasn't aware you spoke for your wife's business interests, Richard said mildly, but there was steel underneath the politeness. I don't, Elena said firmly, and I'd be very interested in attending, Mr. Sterling. Richard, please. He handed her a business card, actual paper, elegant and understated. My assistant's information is on there. Have her contact you with the details. I'll do that. Thank you. Richard nodded to them both, his smile warm for Elena and considerably cooler for Victor, then moved back into the crowd. The moment he was out of earshot, Victor grabbed Elena's arm again. What are you playing at? I'm networking. Isn't that what you do at these events? You're embarrassing me, making yourself the center of attention. I'm existing, Victor. I'm talking to people. If that embarrasses you, perhaps you should examine why my presence is so threatening. Don't psychoanalyze me. His fingers dug into her arm. You want attention? Fine, but you're going to regret this. Let go of my arm. Or what? Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. Had he always been like this? Had she been so blinded by infatuation that she'd missed the signs? Or had success and power transformed him into someone new, someone she never would have married? Or I'll make a scene, she said quietly. And unlike you, I won't care who's watching. For a moment she thought he might actually do something. His face was flushed, his breathing rapid, his entire body tense with barely controlled anger. Then someone called his name from across the hall. A tech industry CEO whose investment he'd been courting for months. Victor released her arm and stepped back. This conversation isn't over. Yes, it is. Elena turned and walked away, heading toward the bar. Her wrist ached where he'd gripped it, and she knew there would be bruises tomorrow. But she felt strangely exhilarated, as if some essential part of herself had just broken free of a cage she'd been living in for 3 years. At the bar, she ordered another glass of champagne and tried to steady her breathing. Her hands were shaking slightly. Adrenaline, not fear. She'd just stood up to Victor in public, had refused to back down, had claimed her own identity despite his fury. That looked intense. Elena turned to find Madeline standing beside her, also ordering a drink. Up close, Victor's executive VP was even more striking, sharp cheekbones, ice blue eyes, an expression that gave away absolutely nothing. Just a small disagreement, Elena said carefully. About your little revelation? Madeline accepted a martini from the bartender. V, that's quite the secret to keep. It wasn't a secret, it was private. There's a difference. Not to Victor, there isn't. Madeline took a sip of her drink. He hates surprises. Hates not being in control. I've noticed. They stood in silence for a moment. Two women connected only by the same man, watching the crowd. Elena had spent 3 years hating Madeline, or trying to, but mostly just feeling inadequate in comparison. Now, standing beside her, she realized Madeline was just another person trapped in Victor's orbit, playing a role he'd assigned her. "How long have you been sleeping with him?" Elena asked quietly. She expected denial, outrage, or deflection. Instead, Madeline laughed, a short, sharp sound. "I'm not sleeping with Victor." Elena turned to look at her. "The hotels, the late nights, the way you're always together." "We work together, that's all." Madeline met her eyes. "Victor likes people to think there's more because it makes him look desirable, powerful. A man important enough to juggle a wife and a mistress. But it's performance. I have no interest in him romantically. Then why let people think it? Because it's useful. For both of us." Madeline's smile was cold. "He gets to look like a player. I get to be seen as untouchable, someone who has the CEO's ear. In tech, that's worth more than any title." "That's calculating, manipulative. Welcome to Victor's world, Elena. Everything is strategy. Everyone is a piece on his board." Madeline finished her martini. "The difference between you and me is that I knew that going in. You thought you were marrying a partner." The words hit harder than they should have. Elena had thought that, had believed Victor when he talked about building something together, about being a team. "Why are you telling me this?" Elena asked. "Because watching you finally fight back is the most interesting thing that's happened at one of these events in years." Madeline set down her empty glass. "And because Victor's about to try to destroy you for it. You should be prepared." "Destroy me?" "He can't stand being upstaged, can't tolerate not being the most important person in any room." Madeline's expression softened slightly, almost to sympathy. "You just revealed that you built an empire while he thought you were playing housewife. That's not something his ego can survive." Before Elena could respond, the lights dimmed slightly, the signal that dinner was about to be served. Madeline straightened, her professional mask sliding back into place. "Good luck," she said, and disappeared into the crowd. Elena stood at the bar for another moment, processing. Then she took her champagne and went to find her table. The seating arrangements were exactly what she'd expected. Victor was at the head table on the raised platform at the front of the hall, surrounded by other tech CEOs and industry leaders. Elena was at table 17, tucked near the back with other spouses and plus ones. People considered important enough to invite, but not important enough to showcase. Usually, this would have stung. Tonight, Elena was grateful for the distance. She found her place card, Mrs. Victor Hale, not even her first name, and sat down between a woman who introduced herself as the wife of a venture capitalist and a man who seemed to be someone's adult son, dragged along to make connections. "Your dress is incredible," the woman said immediately. "Is that really V?" "It is. I've been trying to get an appointment with V's atelier for months. They told me the waiting list is over a year long." 14 months, actually, Elena said. "Last I checked." The woman laughed. "Well, if you have any connections, I'd kill for an introduction." Elena smiled and said nothing, letting the conversation flow around her. From her vantage point, she could see Victor at the head table, Madeline to his right, laughing at something some tech billionaire was saying. He looked relaxed, controlled, completely in his element. But every few minutes, his eyes would find her across the room, and she could see the anger there, barely masked. Dinner was served, some elaborate multi-course meal that Elena barely tasted. She was too aware of the attention on her, the whispered conversations, the way people kept glancing at her table and then looking away. Sarah Chen's article had apparently gone live during cocktail hour because several people checked their phones and then stared at Elena with new interest. She was no longer invisible, and there was no going back. The speeches began after the main course. Tech leaders talking about innovation and disruption, politicians praising the industry's contribution to the economy, charity organizers thanking everyone for their generosity. Elena had sat through dozens of these events, always in the back, always unnoticed. Then Victor took the stage. He was good at this, commanding, articulate, inspiring. He talked about his company's vision for the future, about artificial intelligence changing the world, about the responsibility of those with power to shape that change. The audience was rapt, hanging on his every word. Elena watched him and felt nothing. No pride, no anger, not even sadness. Just a strange emptiness where her feelings for him used to be. And I have to say, Victor continued, his voice warm and intimate, that none of this would be possible without the support of the people closest to us. The partners who believe in our vision, the colleagues who push us to be better, the people who stand beside us in the trenches. His eyes found Madeline, who smiled up at him from the head table. Not Elena. Never Elena. Madeline Frost has been instrumental in our success this year, Victor said. Her strategic vision, her tireless work ethic, her commitment to excellence, these are the qualities that build empires. Applause rippled through the room. Madeline stood and gave a small wave, gracious and humble. Victor didn't mention his wife, didn't acknowledge Elena's existence. It was as if she wasn't even in the room. 3 years ago, this would have devastated her. Tonight, Elena just felt tired. The speeches ended and music began, a live orchestra playing something classical and elegant. People moved to the dance floor or gathered in clusters to network. Elena excused herself from her table and stepped out onto one of the museum's terraces, needing air. The San Francisco night was cool and clear, the Golden Gate Bridge lit up in the distance. Elena leaned against the stone railing and closed her eyes, feeling the breeze on her face. Beautiful view. She opened her eyes to find Richard Sterling standing a few feet away, also looking out at the bridge. It is, she agreed, though I suspect you needed some distance from the view inside more than you needed to see this one. Elena laughed despite herself. That obvious? Only to someone paying attention. Richard moved to stand beside her at the railing. Your husband gave quite a speech. Didn't mention you once. I noticed. That bothered you? It would have. 3 years ago. Elena turned to look at him. Now it just feels predictable. Richard studied her face for a moment. You're leaving him. It wasn't a question. Elena didn't confirm or deny it, but she didn't have to. Richard nodded as if she'd spoken aloud. That's why you revealed yourself tonight. You're done hiding. I was never hiding. I was just... She struggled to find the right words. Existing in parallel, maintaining 2 separate lives. But you're right. I'm done with that. He'll fight you. Men like Victor don't let go easily. I know. Do you have a good lawyer? The best. Richard smiled. Smart. You'll need one. He pulled out his phone, typed something, and handed it to her. That's my personal number. If you need anything during this process, resources, advice, someone to make a phone call, use it. Elena looked at the number, then at Richard. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. I know Victor. Worked with him on a deal 2 years ago. Brilliant strategist. Absolute nightmare as a human being. Richard pocketed his phone. Also, I have 3 daughters. If any of them were in your position, I'd hope someone would offer them a hand. Thank you, Elena said, meaning it. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get ugly. Richard turned to head back inside, then paused. One more thing. That smart fabric idea? I'm serious about the investment opportunity. V could be worth $500 million in the right market with the right backing. Don't let Victor convince you your work is less valuable than his. He disappeared back into the museum, leaving Elena alone with the San Francisco skyline and her thoughts. She pulled out her own phone and texted Maria. It's done. Everyone knows. The response came back immediately. I saw. You're trending on Twitter. How does it feel? Elena thought about the question. How did it feel to be seen after 3 years of invisibility? To claim her identity in front of the people who dismissed her? Like I can finally breathe, she typed back. She stayed on the terrace for another 10 minutes, gathering her strength for the return inside. When she finally walked back into the museum hall, the energy had shifted. People weren't just glancing at her anymore. They were openly staring. Several approached her directly, introducing themselves, asking about V, requesting meetings. Elena handled each interaction with grace, distributing Maria's contact information, deflecting personal questions, maintaining the mystery that had made V successful while also being present in a way she never had been before. She was so focused on a conversation with a fashion journalist that she didn't notice Victor approaching until he was right beside her. "Excuse us," he said to the journalist, his smile tight. "I need to borrow my wife." The journalist's eyes widened slightly, clearly recognizing the tension, but she retreated with a quick, "Of course." Victor's hand closed around Elena's elbow, and he steered her toward the edge of the hall. His grip was hard enough to hurt, hard enough that Elena knew the bruises from earlier would have company. "You're making a spectacle," he said through gritted teeth. "I'm networking. You told me to network. I told you to be appropriate, invisible, not to—" He gestured at her, at the dress, at everything. "This. Why does my visibility threaten you so much, Victor?" "It doesn't threaten me. It's embarrassing. You're my wife. You should be supporting me, not trying to compete with me." Elena pulled her arm free. "I've spent 3 years supporting you, being invisible so you could shine, playing the dutiful wife while you paraded Madeline around like she was your partner. I'm done." "Done?" Victor's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means exactly what you think it means. You want a divorce." He said it flatly, as if he'd been expecting it. "Yes? Because of this? Because I didn't mention you in a speech? Because you haven't mentioned me in 3 years." Elena's voice rose despite her effort to stay calm. "Because you treat me like furniture. Because you've made me invisible while claiming you love me. Because I deserve better than this." People were definitely watching now. Elena could see phones recording, could imagine the headlines already writing themselves. She should care about that, should be embarrassed by the public nature of this conversation, but she felt nothing except relief. "Fine," Victor said, his voice cold. "You want a divorce? You'll get one. And I'll make sure you regret every second of this little performance." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. You think you can embarrass me? Make me look like a fool in front of everyone who matters?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. "I will destroy you, Elena. I will take V. I will take every penny you've made, and I will make sure everyone knows you built it all while married to me, using my money, my connections, my name. V existed before you. It's protected. We'll see what a judge says about that." Victor straightened, his public smile sliding back into place. "Enjoy your moment, darling. It won't last long." He walked away, back to the head table where Madeline waited. Elena stood there, her heart pounding, her hands shaking slightly. She'd done it. She'd finally said it out loud. She wanted a divorce. And Victor had just declared war. Sarah Chan appeared at her elbow. "Did he just threaten you? Because I have that on video if you need it." Elena turned to look at the journalist, who held up her phone with an apologetic expression. "I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but he wasn't exactly quiet, and you're kind of the story of the night. Can you send me that video?" "Already done. Send it to the email on V's website contact page." Sarah pocketed her phone. "For what it's worth, I've covered Victor Hale for 5 years. This is the first time I've ever seen him look genuinely scared." "Scared?" He looked furious. Same thing with men like him. Fury is just fear with a better public face. Sarah glanced toward the head table. He knows he's losing control. That terrifies him. Elena followed her gaze. Victor was talking animatedly with a group of executives, laughing at something, playing the part of the successful CEO without a care in the world. But every few seconds, his eyes would flick toward Elena, and she could see the calculation there. He was planning something. She could feel it. "I should go," Elena said. "Probably wise. But Elena?" Sarah waited until she had her full attention. "Be careful. Men like Victor don't lose gracefully." Elena nodded and made her way toward the exit. Several people tried to stop her for conversation, but she deflected politely, suddenly desperate to be out of the museum, away from the crowds and the cameras and the weight of everyone's attention. The valet brought her car around, and she tipped him generously before sliding behind the wheel. For a moment, she just sat there, her hands on the steering wheel, processing everything that had happened. She'd revealed herself, confronted Victor, asked for a divorce, declared war on a man who had infinite resources and no conscience. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maria. "You're everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, 3 fashion blogs, and the tech news sites. How are you holding up?" Elena typed back, "I'll tell you tomorrow. Heading home now." Except the penthouse wasn't home. It was Victor's territory, his space, a beautiful cage she'd been living in. She didn't want to go back there tonight, didn't want to risk another confrontation. Instead, she drove to the studio, let herself in through the side entrance, and climbed the stairs to her office. Maria kept a couch there for late nights, and Elena had spare clothes in the closet. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She changed out of the midnight blue masterpiece and into comfortable clothes, then sat at her desk and opened her laptop. The internet had indeed exploded. Photos of her at the gala, speculation about V's identity, articles analyzing her relationship with Victor, think pieces about women in tech and fashion. Her personal email was flooded. Interview requests, meeting requests, congratulations from people she'd never met. It was overwhelming and exhilarating in equal measure. One email stood out. The sender was listed as concerned friend, but when Elena opened it, she recognized Madeline's personal email address at the bottom. "You were right to reveal yourself," the email read, "and you're right to leave him. But you need to know what you're up against. Victor is already calling his lawyers. He's planning to file first to control the narrative. He's going to claim V was built using marital assets, that you owe him half of everything. More than that, he's going to try to destroy your reputation. He has files on you, private investigators' reports, financial audits, things he's been collecting just in case. I don't know what's in them, but I know he's planning to use them. Protect yourself, document everything, and don't trust anyone in his orbit, including me if he asks. I can't risk my position, but I can give you this one warning. Good luck, you're going to need it." Elena read the email 3 times, then forwarded it to her lawyer with a note. "We need to talk. First thing tomorrow." She closed the laptop and lay down on the couch, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, the war would truly begin. Victor would come after her with everything he had. He'd try to take V, her money, her reputation. He'd make her regret standing up to him. But tonight, just for tonight, Elena let herself feel victorious. She'd stopped being invisible. She'd claimed her identity. She'd said no to a man who thought he owned her. Whatever came next, she'd face it as herself. Not as Victor's wife. Not as the invisible woman in the gray dress. Just Elena. Just V. And that was enough. The silence that followed Elena's revelation lasted perhaps 3 seconds. But it felt like the world had stopped rotating. Sarah Chen's eyes went wide, her phone nearly slipping from her hand. The small crowd that had gathered around them stood frozen, champagne glasses suspended midair, mouths slightly open in collective shock. Then the room exploded. Not literally, of course, but the effect was similar. Phones appeared from clutches and jacket pockets, fingers flying across screens. The whispers that had followed Elena earlier became a roar of excited conversation. Camera flashes erupted from every direction as photographers who'd been covering the general event suddenly had a real story. Elena stood at the center of it all, perfectly calm, her champagne glass steady in her hand. She'd imagined this moment 1,000 times during those long mornings in her studio, had rehearsed the revelation in her mind until it felt like memory rather than fantasy. But the reality was so much more intense, more visceral, more utterly intoxicating than she'd anticipated. She was visible. Finally, completely, undeniably visible. Across the room, Victor was moving toward her, his face a carefully controlled mask. But Elena knew him well enough to read the fury in the tightness around his eyes, the rigidity of his shoulders. Madeline followed 2 steps behind, her expression unreadable, one hand on her phone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor's voice cut through the noise, projecting that casual authority he'd perfected over years of keynote speeches and board meetings. "I see my wife has caused quite a stir. Elena does love her dramatic moments." The condescension in his tone was subtle but unmistakable. He was already working to minimize her, to frame this revelation as some kind of attention-seeking behavior rather than the earthquake it actually was. Elena turned to face him, and their eyes met across the 15 feet of marble floor that separated them. In that moment, something passed between them. An acknowledgement that the marriage, whatever pretense had remained, was now truly over. "Victor," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "So nice of you to finally acknowledge my presence. I was beginning to think I'd need to set something on fire to get your attention. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Victor's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold. Darling, perhaps we should discuss this privately. Why? Elena interrupted, moving closer to him. We've done everything else publicly. Your business, your partnership with Madeline, your complete disregard for our marriage. Why should this be any different? Madeline stepped forward, her hand reaching for Victor's arm in a gesture that was probably meant to be subtle, but looked possessive to everyone watching. Mrs.
Hale, I think Victor is right. This isn't the appropriate venue. Oh, I'm sorry. Was I talking to you? Elena's gaze shifted to the other woman, and something in her expression made Madeline actually take a step back. I must have missed the part where my husband's employee became a participant in our marriage. The crowd had gone silent again, everyone straining to hear. Sarah Chen was definitely recording now, her phone held at chest level, trying to be discreet but failing entirely. Victor's carefully controlled expression finally cracked, real anger bleeding through. Elena, that's enough. You're making a scene. A scene? Elena laughed, and the sound was sharp as broken glass. Victor, I've been invisible for 3 years. I've sat at your dinner parties while people looked through me. I've watched you parade your business partner around like she's your actual wife while I stayed home in our empty penthouse. I've been quiet, compliant, exactly what you wanted me to be.
And now, the one night I decide to exist, you're concerned about a scene? She moved closer, close enough that only he could hear her next words. The scene hasn't even started yet. Before Victor could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. Well, this is far more entertaining than the usual gala fare. Elena turned to find a man in his late 50s approaching, distinguished in the way that comes from old money and older confidence. She recognized him immediately. Richard Sterling, one of the most powerful venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, maybe in the world. His investments had created a dozen unicorn companies, and his endorsement could make or break an IPO. Victor's entire demeanor shifted, the anger disappearing behind a professional smile. Richard, good to see you. I apologize for the... Don't apologize, Richard said, his eyes on Elena. I've been bored to tears for the last hour listening to tech bros explain blockchain to me like I'm their grandmother.
This is the most interesting thing that's happened all evening. He extended his hand to Elena. Richard Sterling, and you, I gather, are the mysterious V? Elena shook his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm. This was someone who still worked with his hands, despite the billions. Elena Cross, formerly Vasquez, currently having an identity crisis about which name actually belongs to me. Richard smiled, genuine amusement in his eyes. Well, Elena Cross Vasquez, whoever you are, I've been trying to commission a piece from V for my daughter's wedding for 6 months. My people tell me the wait list is 2 years and the designer doesn't take meetings. I don't suppose you could help me with that. That depends, Elena said. Are you looking for V, the mysterious designer, or are you looking for me? Oh, I'm looking for you, Richard replied. Mystery is overrated. Talent, on the other hand, is priceless.
Victor had been standing there, his smile frozen, clearly trying to figure out how to regain control of the conversation. Richard, I had no idea you were interested in fashion. Perhaps we should discuss this later. Why later? Richard didn't even look at Victor. I'm interested in smart investments, Victor. And your wife, your incredibly talented wife, who you apparently didn't know was running a multi-million-dollar fashion empire, strikes me as a very smart investment. The emphasis on didn't know was deliberate, and Elena saw Victor's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Multi-million? Someone in the crowd whispered. V's worth way more than that. I heard the Nakamura commission alone was $500,000. Richard pulled out his phone, scrolling briefly. According to my research, which I just did in the last 5 minutes, by the way, the V brand is estimated to be worth somewhere between $300 and $500 million. The exact number is hard to pin down since the company is privately held and the owner was anonymous. Until tonight. He looked at Victor with an expression that was almost pitying. You really didn't know? Victor's face had gone pale beneath his tan. Elena watched him process the information, saw the exact moment he realized what it meant. She'd expected anger, expected him to lash out or try to assert dominance. She hadn't expected him to laugh. But he did. A short, sharp sound that made several people jump. This is ridiculous. Elena, if you've been running some kind of fashion business, that's wonderful. But let's not exaggerate. 300 million is conservative, Elena said quietly. The actual valuation, based on the last private equity inquiry, was closer to 450 million. I turned down the offer. I'm not interested in selling. The number hung in the air like a physical thing. Around them, Elena could hear the whispers intensifying, could see phones being raised to capture this moment, this implosion of Silicon Valley's golden couple. Victor's mouth opened, closed, opened again. For perhaps the first time in their 3-year marriage, he seemed at a complete loss for words. It was Madeline who broke the silence, her voice tight with something that sounded like panic. Victor, the investors, they're watching. We need to get ahead of this. And there it was, Elena thought, the real concern. Not the revelation itself, not the marriage, not even the money. The optics, the impact on Victor's precious IPO, the carefully constructed narrative of Victor Hale, genius CEO with the perfect life, was crumbling in real time, and Madeline could see the financial implications. Victor seemed to shake himself, the shock receding behind calculation. Elena, clearly we have a lot to discuss, but this is neither the time nor the place. If you'll excuse us, he reached for her arm, that same controlling grip he'd used earlier. Elena stepped back, just out of reach. No. No? No, I won't excuse you. No, we won't discuss this later. And no, you don't get to touch me like that anymore. She looked around at the gathered crowd, at the cameras, at the sea of fascinated faces. Everyone here deserves to know the truth. Victor Hale's perfect success story? It's built on a foundation you didn't know existed. The invisible wife wasn't so invisible after all. Sarah Chen pushed forward, her journalist instincts fully engaged. Mrs. Hale, Elena, can you confirm when you started the V brand? Was it before or during your marriage? Before, Elena said clearly. I founded V 4 years ago, a full year before I met Victor. Everything I built independently. The trademark, the company structure, the client list, all of it existed before Victor and I set our vows. So, legally, your assets are separate? Sarah pressed. Elena smiled. Completely separate. The V brand exists in an irrevocable trust established before my marriage. Victor has no claim to it whatsoever. She watched her husband's face as that information landed, saw him finally understand what she'd done. The secret wasn't just about hiding her success, it was about protecting it. From him. Victor's voice, when he finally spoke, was low and dangerous. You've been lying to me for 3 years. No, Elena corrected. I've been maintaining my privacy for 3 years. There's a difference. You never asked what I did with my days. You never asked about my past. You never asked about me at all, actually. You were too busy with your company and your reputation and your, she glanced at Madeline, your strategic operations. A man in the crowd laughed at that, quickly stifled, but not quickly enough. Victor's face flushed red. How dare you embarrass me like this, he hissed, stepping closer to her. In front of everyone, in front of investors, in front of witnesses, Elena finished. That's the point, Victor. I'm done being embarrassed in private. I'm done being dismissed in private. I'm done being invisible in private. If I'm going to end this marriage, I'm going to do it where everyone can see. The room went completely silent. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving, champagne bottles frozen mid-pour. Victor stared at her, and for a moment Elena saw something almost like hurt in his eyes. But it passed quickly, replaced by cold calculation. You want a divorce? Fine, but you're not taking anything from me. I'll make sure of it. I don't want anything from you, Elena said. I never did. That's what you never understood. I didn't marry you for your money or your status. I married you because I thought you were someone you're not. My mistake. One I'm correcting now. Richard Sterling, who'd been watching this exchange with undisguised fascination, cleared his throat. Victor, perhaps you should consider— Stay out of this, Richard. Victor's voice was sharp enough to cut. This is between me and my wife. Your soon-to-be ex-wife, Elena corrected. And actually, Richard, I'd love to hear what you were going to say. Richard looked between them, then shrugged. I was just going to point out that making threats in front of a room full of people with phones is probably not the best strategy. But what do I know? I've only been doing business for 40 years. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Victor looked around as if seeing the gathered masses for the first time, seeing the phones, the cameras, the documentation of his humiliation. His face went from red to white. Madeline touched his arm again. "Victor, we should go. Regroup. Get the lawyers." "The lawyers?" Elena interrupted. "Oh, you mean the team of very expensive attorneys who will inform you that you have absolutely no legal standing to touch my company? The ones who will explain that threatening your spouse in public could be considered intimidation? Those lawyers?" She was pushing now, she knew, pushing harder than was probably wise. But 3 years of swallowing her voice had created a reservoir of words that needed to come out, and she couldn't stop them any more than she could stop breathing. Victor's eyes narrowed. "You think you're very clever, don't you? You think you've won something here, but you have no idea what you've just done to yourself. I have connections you can't imagine. I have resources that could destroy you. And trust me, Elena, I will use every single one of them." "Is that a threat?" Sarah Chen asked, her phone still recording. Victor's head snapped toward her. "This is a private conversation." "Actually," Sarah said, not backing down an inch, "this is a public event, and you're making what sounds a lot like threats against your wife in front of approximately 200 witnesses. That's a story. A big one." Elena felt a surge of gratitude toward this journalist she barely knew, but before she could respond, another voice joined the conversation. "Mr. Hale, perhaps we should discuss your company's IPO timeline." A man in an expensive suit had approached, someone Elena recognized as one of Victor's major investors. His expression was carefully neutral, but there was steel underneath. "Given tonight's revelations, the board might want to reassess our public offering strategy." And there it was. The real consequence. Victor's company was supposed to go public in 3 months, a multi-billion-dollar IPO that would cement his status as a tech titan. But IPOs required stability, required confidence, required the appearance of control. Victor was losing control in the most public way possible. "The IPO proceeds as scheduled," Victor said, his voice tight. "This is a personal matter. It has nothing to do with the company. Respectfully, sir, everything has to do with the company right now. Your personal brand is intrinsically linked to our valuation. If the markets perceive instability—" "There is no instability," Victor snapped. "My wife had a secret hobby that turned into a business. Congratulations to her. It changes nothing." "A secret hobby worth $500 million, Richard Sterling interjected. "Victor, I'm trying to help you here. The optics are bad. The narrative is bad. You look like either you were completely ignorant of what was happening under your own roof, or you were deliberately hiding assets. Neither is a good look for a CEO going into an IPO." Elena watched her husband's face cycle through emotions: anger, fear, calculation, and finally, a cold determination that made her stomach tighten. She knew that look. That was the look Victor got when he decided to destroy a competitor. She was the competitor now. "Fine," Victor said quietly, dangerously. "You want to play this game, Elena? Let's play. But don't say I didn't warn you." He turned and walked away, Madeline trailing behind him like a shadow. The investor looked at Elena with something that might have been sympathy or might have been pity, then followed. The crowd around Elena didn't dissipate. If anything, more people pressed closer, everyone talking at once, asking questions, offering congratulations or condolences or business cards. It was overwhelming, suffocating, exactly what she'd wanted, and absolutely terrifying. Richard Sterling appeared at her elbow, somehow creating space around them through sheer presence. "That was either the bravest thing I've seen in years, or the most reckless. I haven't decided which." "Can it be both?" Elena asked, accepting another champagne flute from a passing waiter. Her hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline finally catching up with her. "Usually is," Richard agreed. He studied her for a moment. "You meant what you said? About not wanting anything from him?" "Every word." "Good. Because he's going to come at you hard. Victor Hale doesn't lose gracefully, and you just made him lose in front of everyone who matters in his world." Richard pulled out a business card, pressed it into her hand. "When you're ready to discuss that wedding dress, call me. And when you need legal representation for the divorce, because you're going to need the best, call the number on the back. Tell them I sent you. Elena looked at the card, then back at him. Why are you helping me? Richard's smile was sharp. Because I've been watching Victor Hale for the last 5 years, waiting for him to show his true character. Arrogance I can handle. Brilliance I respect. But a man who treats his wife like furniture while playing perfect husband for the cameras, that's a character flaw that eventually infects everything he touches. I want to see what you do next. I have a feeling it's going to be spectacular. He walked away, leaving Elena standing in the middle of the gala, still holding his card, feeling like she'd just stepped off a cliff and discovered she could fly. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Dozens of people approached her, some offering genuine congratulations, others clearly just wanting to be part of the drama. She answered questions as vaguely as she could, smiled until her face hurt, and tried to process the fact that her entire life had just changed irrevocably in the space of 2 hours. Sarah Chen cornered her again near the end of the night. I'm writing this story for tomorrow's edition. Do you want to add anything on the record? Elena considered. She could play it safe, could issue some bland statement about privacy and personal growth, or she could be honest. On the record, Elena said, for 3 years, I've watched brilliant women dim their light to make mediocre men comfortable. I'm done dimming. I'm done making anyone comfortable at my own expense. If my story helps even one person find the courage to stop being invisible, then tonight was worth it. Sarah smiled, typing rapidly on her phone. That's going to be my headline. The invisible wife stops disappearing. Perfect, Elena said. She left the gala alone, walking out to her car while cameras still flashed, while people still whispered, while her soon-to-be ex-husband plotted her destruction somewhere in the museum behind her. The drive back to the penthouse felt surreal. She'd left that morning as Elena Cross, invisible wife. She was returning as Elena Vasquez, creator of V, worth $500 million, and suddenly very, very visible. The penthouse was dark when she arrived. Victor wasn't home yet, probably still at the gala, doing damage control, spinning the narrative. She walked through the rooms she'd lived in for 3 years, seeing them differently now. This wasn't her home. It had never been her home. It was a beautiful cage she'd lived in while building her real life somewhere else. She went to the bedroom, opened her closet, and pulled out a suitcase. She didn't pack much. Some clothes, some toiletries, the few personal items that actually mattered. Everything else could stay. She didn't want any of it. Her phone buzzed constantly. Texts, calls, social media notifications. The story was already spreading, already viral. She was trending on Twitter. Fashion blogs were exploding with the revelation. Someone had created a hashtag, Invisible No More. Elena smiled at that, then turned off her phone. She was leaving the bedroom when she heard the front door slam. Victor's footsteps echoed on the marble floor, fast and angry. Elena! His voice boomed through the penthouse. Where are you? She walked out to meet him, suitcase in hand. He stopped when he saw her, his eyes dropping to the luggage. Running away? He sneered. How predictable. Not running, Elena said calmly. Leaving. There's a difference. You're not going anywhere until we talk about this disaster you've created. Disaster? Elena laughed. Victor, I've created an empire. The only disaster is that you were too self-absorbed to notice. He moved closer, and she saw the rage in his eyes, barely controlled. You made me look like a fool tonight. Do you understand that? You humiliated me in front of investors, colleagues, everyone who matters. I told the truth, Elena said. If the truth humiliates you, that's not my problem. Everything about you is my problem now. Victor's voice rose. Do you think I'm just going to let you walk away? Let you destroy everything I've built because you wanted attention? I don't need your permission to leave, Victor. Actually, you do. His smile was cold, calculated. Community property laws in California are very clear. Anything acquired during a marriage is joint property. That includes businesses. Your precious V empire? I own half of it. Elena had been waiting for this. She set down her suitcase and pulled out her phone, opening a file her lawyer had prepared months ago, anticipating this exact moment. Actually, you don't. The V brand exists in an irrevocable trust established 15 months before we married. The trust documentation is airtight. You have no legal claim to any of it. She held up her phone, showing him the legal documents. I had very good lawyers, Victor. Better than yours. She watched his face as he processed this, saw the calculation, the anger, the desperate search for leverage. Fine, he said finally. Keep your fashion business. But this penthouse? My accounts? Everything we've accumulated together?
I'll make sure you get nothing. I don't want anything, Elena repeated. I'm leaving with exactly what I brought into this marriage, myself. That's all I ever needed. You self-righteous... Victor caught himself breathing hard. You think you're better than me? You think hiding your little sewing project makes you morally superior? No, Elena said quietly. I think being honest with myself makes me different from you. I think refusing to be invisible makes me free. And I think loving myself enough to leave makes me smart. She picked up her suitcase and walked toward the door. Elena. His voice stopped her. She turned back. Victor stood in the middle of his perfect penthouse, surrounded by his perfect things, and for just a moment, he looked lost. Did you ever love me? Elena considered the question, considered lying, considered being cruel. But she'd spent 3 years hiding truths. She was done with that. I loved who I thought you were, she said. I'm sorry that person didn't exist. She walked out the door and didn't look back. The elevator ride down felt like ascending, like gravity reversing, like everything she'd been carrying for 3 years finally falling away. When she stepped out into the parking garage, when she threw her suitcase in her car, when she started the engine and pulled out onto the San Francisco streets, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in so long she'd almost forgotten the sensation. She felt free. Her phone buzzed again. She turned it back on to navigate. A text from Maria. Holy shit, boss, are you okay? The whole internet is exploding. Elena smiled and called her. I'm okay, she said when Maria answered. Better than okay. I'm coming to the studio. We have work to do. Now, it's almost midnight. Now, Elena confirmed. Because tomorrow, when this story hits every major news outlet, when Victor starts his revenge campaign, when lawyers get involved and things get ugly, tomorrow, I want to already be working on my next collection. I want to be creating. I want to be doing what I do best. You're insane, Maria said, but Elena could hear the smile in her voice. I'll meet you there in 20 minutes. Elena drove through the empty streets, past the late-night bars and closed boutiques, toward her studio in the Mission. The building looked the same as always, weathered brick, industrial windows, no sign to indicate the empire that existed inside. Except now, everyone knew. The invisible wife had stopped being invisible. And the real story, the one about what happened next, about what she would build in the ruins of her marriage, about the price of visibility and the cost of truth, that story was just beginning. Maria was already waiting when Elena pulled into the studio's small parking lot, leaning against her beat-up Honda with 2 coffee cups in her hands. She straightened when Elena's car appeared, her expression somewhere between concerned and exhilarated. You look surprisingly calm for someone who just nuked their entire life on live social media, Maria said, handing over one of the coffees. Elena accepted it gratefully, the warmth seeping into her hands. I feel calm. Is that weird? Completely insane, Maria confirmed. Have you seen Twitter? You're trending #1 worldwide. #1. There are memes already. Someone made a gif of you saying, I'm V, and it's been shared like 50,000 times in the last 2 hours. Elena pulled out her phone, scrolling through the notifications she'd been ignoring. Maria wasn't exaggerating. Her name, the hashtag #InvisibleNoMore, and Victor's name were all trending. The headlines were already writing themselves across fashion blogs, tech news sites, business journals. She saw screenshots from the gala, video clips of her confrontation with Victor, speculation about her net worth, analysis of V's most famous designs. Vogue just posted an article, Maria said, reading from her own phone. The invisible designer steps into the light, Elena Cross and the secret empire that changed fashion. They used that photo of you from tonight. You know, the one where you look like you're about to murder someone with elegance. I wasn't about to murder anyone. Your face says otherwise. It's a great photo, though. Very powerful. Maria looked up from her phone, her expression turning serious. So what now? What's the plan? Elena took a long sip of coffee, gathering her thoughts. Now we work. I meant what I said.
I want to start the next collection. Tonight. While my head is clear and before the lawyers descend.
The lawyers are definitely going to descend, Maria said. Victor's not going to take this lying down.
I know. Elena unlocked the studio door, the familiar scent of fabric and coffee and creative chaos washing over her. That's exactly why I want to work. He's going to try to destroy me, Maria. He's going to use every resource, every connection, every dirty trick in his arsenal, and I can't stop him from trying. But I can control what I do with my time, with my energy, with my creativity. She flipped on the lights and the studio blazed to life around them. Half-finished designs draped over mannequins, fabric samples pinned to boards, sketches scattered across work tables. This was her real home, had been for years. The penthouse was just where she slept. This was where she lived. Maria set her coffee down and pulled out her laptop. Okay, so what are we making? Elena walked to the design board, staring at the blank space that would become her next collection. Something honest. Something that tells the truth about transformation, about becoming visible, about refusing to be diminished. She picked up a piece of charcoal, began sketching rough lines on the white paper. Something that can't be ignored. They worked through the night, coffee fueling their creativity as Elena's hand moved across paper, creating shapes and structures that felt both armor and art. Maria pulled fabric samples, questioned choices, offered suggestions. The familiar rhythm of collaboration settled over them like a comfortable blanket. Around 3 a.m, Elena's phone rang. She almost ignored it, but the caller ID showed her lawyer's name. Janet Reeves didn't call at 3 a.m. unless something was wrong. Janet? Elena. I'm sorry for the late call, but I thought you'd want to know immediately. Janet's voice was crisp despite the hour. Victor's legal team filed for divorce about an hour ago. They're also filing a civil suit claiming fraud, claiming you hid assets during the marriage, and requesting a full forensic audit of V's finances. Elena had expected this, but the reality still hit like a physical blow. Can they do that? The trust is airtight. The trust is absolutely airtight, Janet confirmed. They have no legal standing whatsoever, but that's not the point. The point is to make this expensive, time-consuming, and public. They're trying to damage your reputation and drain your resources. Classic intimidation tactic. How bad is it? Manageable, but it's going to get uglier before it gets better. I need you in my office first thing tomorrow, today, so we can go through everything and prepare our response. And Elena, don't talk to anyone. No statements, no interviews, no social media. Let me handle the legal communication. Understood. Elena's hand tightened on the phone. Janet, he threatened me tonight at the gala, in front of witnesses. There was a pause. What exactly did he say? Elena recounted Victor's words, the threats about using his connections and resources to destroy her. As she spoke, she could hear Janet typing rapidly. Good. That's very good, actually. Threatening your spouse in public is not a smart move legally. I'll add it to our documentation. Did anyone record it? Half the room was recording. It's probably on YouTube already. Even better. Get some sleep, Elena. Tomorrow we start fighting back. Elena hung up and found Maria watching her with worried eyes. He's suing you? Trying to. Elena set her phone down, picked up her charcoal again. Let him try. The trust is untouchable, and he knows it. This is just theater. He's trying to scare me into a settlement. Is it working? The scaring part? Elena considered the question honestly. 3 years ago, yes, it would have terrified her. The old Elena, the invisible wife, would have been paralyzed by fear of Victor's power and reach. But that woman had walked out of the penthouse tonight and wasn't coming back. No, she said finally. I'm angry. I'm exhausted. But I'm not scared. Not anymore. They worked until dawn painted the warehouse windows gold, until Elena's back ached and her eyes burned with fatigue. But the design board was full now, rough sketches of what would become her most personal collection yet. Pieces that spoke of cages and freedom, of silence and voice, of invisibility and blinding light. It's beautiful, Maria said softly, standing back to look at the full board. Angry, but beautiful. Sometimes anger is beautiful, Elena replied. When it's righteous, when it's earned, when it's transformed into something that can't be dismissed. Her phone buzzed again. Not a call this time, but a flood of texts. Her sister Anna in Boston, frantic with worry. Her former design school roommate Emma, offering congratulations and a place to stay. Her mother, whose message simply read, "Mija, I'm proud of you. Call me when you can." That one made Elena's eyes sting with unexpected tears. She blinked them away, typed back a quick reassurance that she was okay, that she'd call soon. More messages poured in. Richard Sterling, surprisingly, checking if she needed anything. Sarah Chen, asking for a follow-up interview. Designers she'd admired from afar, offering support and collaboration. Business managers, agents, publicists, all suddenly interested in representing her. And then, buried in the flood of mostly positive messages, she found the poison. Anonymous texts from a burner number. "You stupid bitch, you'll regret embarrassing him." Another. "Gold-digging whore, everyone knows what you really are." A third. "Watch your back." Elena showed them to Maria, who went pale. "You need to show these to the police." "I will, after I show them to Janet." Elena screenshotted each message, forwarded them to her lawyer. "Victor's probably not stupid enough to send these himself, but someone in his circle is. This is getting scary, Elena." "It's going to get scarier," Elena said. "Victor's entire identity is wrapped up in control and dominance. I just stripped both away from him in the most public way possible. He's going to lash out. The question is how far he'll go." The answer came faster than either of them expected. By the time Elena left the studio at 8 a.m. to head to Janet's office, the morning news cycle had begun, and Victor had clearly been busy. His PR team had released a statement painting Elena as unstable, claiming she'd hidden assets and deceived him throughout their marriage. Anonymous sources, obviously from Victor's camp, were quoted in tech blogs suggesting Elena had married him specifically to steal his business contacts and credibility. One particularly vicious article implied she'd been running V as a side operation to launder money, though it stopped just short of outright accusation. The narrative was clear. Elena was the villain. Victor was the victim. He was a successful businessman, betrayed by a manipulative wife who'd used him for 3 years. It was masterful character assassination, and it was working. By the time Elena reached Janet's downtown office, her social media feeds were splitting into camps. Half still supported her, angry at Victor's obvious attempts at manipulation, but the other half was buying his story, calling her a liar, and worse. Janet's office was all glass and steel, sharp angles and expensive furniture. The lawyer herself matched the aesthetic, mid-50s, impeccably dressed, with eyes that missed nothing. "Sit," Janet commanded, gesturing to a leather chair. "We have a lot to cover and not much time." For the next 3 hours, they went through everything. The trust documents establishing V's independence. Financial records proving Elena had built her company before meeting Victor. Email chains showing she'd kept her business completely separate from his resources. Witness statements from designers, clients, and Maria confirming the timeline. "This is excellent," Janet said, reviewing the documentation. "Ironclad. Victor doesn't have a case, but that doesn't mean he won't try to make this as painful as possible. So what do? We do what you should have done from the beginning. We tell your story, completely and truthfully, before he can twist it further." Janet pulled up her laptop. "I want to schedule a formal press conference. Not an interview, not a social media post. A professional, controlled environment where you make a statement and answer vetted questions. We control the narrative." Elena felt her stomach clench. "I'm not good with public speaking." "You were fine last night at the gala. That was adrenaline and anger. This is different." "This is survival," Janet said bluntly. "Victor is out there right now poisoning the well. If you stay silent, his version becomes the truth. You need to claim your own story." Elena thought about that, about visibility, about voice, about refusing to be silent anymore. "Okay. When?" "Tomorrow. That gives us today to prepare, to craft your statement, to get ahead of whatever Victor throws at us next." Janet's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her expression darkened. Speaking of which, she turned her laptop around. On the screen was a news alert from a major business publication. Hale Industries files federal complaint against V Fashion Group, alleges trademark infringement and unfair competition. Elena felt the ground shift beneath her. What? That's insane. V existed before I even met him, before his company had anything to do with fashion or lifestyle brands. I know, and we can prove it. But proving it takes time, and in the meantime, this creates doubt. It makes you look legally questionable. It scares away potential clients and investors. Janet was already typing furiously. This is aggressive, more aggressive than I expected him to go this fast. He's trying to destroy my business. He's trying to destroy you, Janet corrected. The business is just the weapon. Elena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Is there anything at all in your past, your business dealings, your personal life that Victor could use against you? Any skeletons, any mistakes, any vulnerabilities? Elena thought carefully. No. I've been obsessively careful about keeping everything legal, documented, separate. The only thing I've ever hidden was my identity as V, and that was my right. What about your finances? Any cash transactions, any offshore accounts, anything that could look suspicious? Everything runs through legitimate business accounts. All taxes paid, all documentation filed. My accountant is paranoid about compliance. Janet nodded, satisfied. Good. That's good. Because they're going to dig, Elena. They're going to look for anything they can use. Bank records, old relationships, college roommates who might say something unflattering. They'll investigate everyone around you. Maria, my assistant, she's been with me from the beginning. Will they go after her? Probably. Anyone close to you becomes a target. Janet saw Elena's expression and softened slightly. I know this is overwhelming, but you need to understand what you're up against. Victor has unlimited resources and a massive ego. You embarrassed him publicly. Men like that don't forgive. They retaliate. Elena's phone rang. Unknown number. She declined it. It rang again immediately. Different number. She declined again. Journalists, Janet said, they'll be relentless for the next few days. Don't answer any calls you don't recognize. Don't respond to any messages asking for comment. Everything goes through me. The phone rang a third time. This time, Elena recognized the number. Her mother. She answered. Mija, are you okay? I'm seeing terrible things online about you and that man. Her mother's voice, thick with worry and a Mexican accent that deepened when she was upset, nearly broke Elena's composure. Mama, I'm fine. I'm with my lawyer. Everything is going to be okay. That man is saying horrible things, lies. I never liked him, you know. Too smooth, too... She searched for the word. Too shiny. Like a car salesman. Despite everything, Elena smiled. You told me that at the wedding. You should have listened to your mother. We know things. But you're strong, like your abuela. You'll survive this. Do you need money? I have some savings. No, Mama, I don't need money. I have plenty of money. But thank you. Then come home. Come to Boston. Stay with me until this blows over. I can't run away from this. I have to face it. Her mother sighed, long and heavy. I know, but a mother worries. Call me every day so I know you're alive and not murdered by that terrible man. I'll call every day, Elena promised. I love you. Te amo, mija. Be careful. Elena hung up to find Janet watching her with something approaching sympathy. Family? My mother. She wants me to hide in Boston until this is over. Not the worst idea, honestly, but it would look like retreat, like admission of guilt. Janet closed her laptop. Here's what's going to happen over the next few days. Victor's going to escalate. The lawsuit, the media attacks, the intimidation, it's all going to get worse before it gets better. He's going to try to isolate you, to make you feel like the whole world is against you. That's the point. He wants you desperate enough to settle on his terms. What are his terms likely to be? Complete control over the V brand narrative, a settlement that makes you look guilty, public apology, probably a gag order preventing you from ever discussing him or the marriage. He wants to win so thoroughly that no one remembers you existed except as a cautionary tale. Elena felt cold. He can't actually get any of that, can he? Legally? No, but he can make you so miserable that you give it to him voluntarily just to make it stop. Janet leaned forward. Elena, I've been doing this for 25 years. I've seen powerful men try to crush their ex-wives in every way imaginable. Some of those women broke. Some gave up. Some disappeared. She paused. But some fought back. And those women? The ones who refused to be erased? They're the ones who won. How do I make sure I'm one of them? By refusing to quit. By showing up to that press conference tomorrow with your head high and your story clear. By not letting him see you sweat, even when you're terrified. By being exactly what you were last night at that gala. Visible, undeniable, and completely unbreakable. Elena left Janet's office with a plan and a sick feeling in her stomach. The press conference was scheduled for 11 a.m. the next day, which gave her less than 24 hours to prepare. Janet's team would draft talking points, prepare for likely questions, coach her on presentation. But first, Elena had to do something she'd been avoiding. She drove to the penthouse, her keys still working on the main entrance. She wasn't sure if Victor had changed the locks yet, but apparently not. The elevator ride up felt like traveling backwards through time, every floor a memory she wanted to forget. The penthouse was exactly as she'd left it 12 hours ago. Victor clearly hadn't been home, or if he had, he'd been too busy destroying her reputation to notice her absence. Elena moved quickly, efficiently, packing the few things she actually cared about. Her abuela's jewelry, photo albums from her childhood, the sketchbooks from design school, a few pieces of clothing that had sentimental value. She worked systematically, leaving behind everything Victor had bought, everything that belonged to this life she was shedding. She was in the bedroom, packing the last box, when she heard the elevator ding in the hallway. Victor's voice echoed through the penthouse, talking on the phone. "I don't care what it costs. I want every piece of dirt you can find on her. Business dealings, old boyfriends, traffic tickets. I don't care. Something we can use." Elena froze, listening. "The trust is a problem, I know. But there has to be a way around it. Talk to Henderson about the trademark angle. If we can prove she was planning this brand while we were dating, we can argue she was setting up a competing interest. It's thin, but it might work." Footsteps approaching the bedroom. Elena straightened, standing her ground. Victor appeared in the doorway, phone still to his ear. He stopped when he saw her, his expression cycling through surprise, anger, and something that might have been satisfaction. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone, hanging up. "Elena, I didn't expect to see you here. I'm just collecting my things." "Your things?" His laugh was bitter. "Everything here is your things, apparently. Everything I thought we built together was actually just yours, hidden away like dirty secrets." "I didn't hide anything, Victor. I just didn't advertise. There's a difference." He moved into the room, and Elena was suddenly aware of how alone they were, how isolated. The penthouse was soundproofed, 47 floors up, nobody around to hear if something went wrong. "You made me look like a fool," Victor said, his voice low and dangerous. "In front of everyone. Investors, colleagues, competitors. Do you have any idea what you've done to my reputation?" "Your reputation?" Elena felt anger surge through her fear. "Victor, you spent 3 years treating me like I didn't exist. You paraded your mistress around while I stayed home being the good invisible wife. You damaged your own reputation. I just stopped hiding the truth. Madeline is not my mistress. Do you really think I'm that stupid? Do you think the entire city doesn't know you're sleeping with her?" Victor's jaw tightened. "My relationship with Madeline is professional, and even if it weren't, it's none of your business. We've barely been married in any real sense for over a year." "Then why are you so angry about the divorce?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He stared at her, and for a moment she saw past the rage to something more complicated underneath. Hurt, maybe, or just wounded pride. "I'm angry," he said finally, "because you lied. Because you made me believe you were something you're not." "What did I make you believe I was?" "Simple, easy, uncomplicated. Someone who would be content to just exist in my life without demanding anything." Elena felt something break inside her at those words. "You wanted a decoration, an accessory, not a wife. I wanted a partner who understood that my work comes first, that my company, my vision, my success, those things matter. They change the world. Your fashion designs?" He waved dismissively. They're pretty dresses, they don't matter. They matter to me. Exactly, they matter to you, not to anyone else. But you couldn't just be happy with your little hobby, could you? You had to make it a statement, had to embarrass me publicly, had to try to compete with actual importance.
Elena picked up the box she'd been packing, holding it against her chest like a shield. I'm not competing with you, Victor. I never was. I was just trying to exist. And you made that impossible. Oh, please. The martyr act doesn't suit you. Victor pulled out his phone, tapped something, then showed her the screen. It was the lawsuit filing, pages of legal jargon claiming she'd defrauded him, stolen from him, deceived him. This is just the beginning. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you really are. A gold digger who trapped me into marriage and used me for connections. I had my own money before I met you, my own business, my own success. That you hid, which makes you a liar. He smiled, cold and calculated. See how this works, Elena? You think you can destroy me? I'm going to bury you so deep no one will remember you existed. Your precious V brand? By the time I'm done, it'll be worthless. Tainted by scandal and legal problems.
No one will want to be associated with it. Elena met his eyes steadily. You can't actually do that, Victor. The brand exists independently. You have no legal claim. I don't need a legal claim. I just need to create doubt, fear, uncertainty. Fashion is built on perception, on brand reputation. I'm going to make sure everyone perceives you as a fraud. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. And the beauty of it is, you can't stop me, because fighting back makes you look guilty. Staying silent makes you look guilty. There's no move you can make that doesn't play into my hands. This was the moment Elena understood exactly what she was dealing with. Not just anger or hurt pride, but genuine malice. Victor didn't just want to win. He wanted to destroy her so completely that she'd never recover. She thought about backing down, about the easy path of settlement and silence, about disappearing again, letting him have his victory, saving herself the pain of prolonged warfare. Then she thought about her studio, her designs, the 3 years she'd spent invisible, and the woman she'd finally become when she stopped hiding. You're right about one thing, she said quietly. I can't stop you from trying. But you're wrong about everything else. Because I'm not going to fight you on your terms, Victor. I'm not going to trade lawsuits and press releases and try to win in court or in the media. Then what are you going to do? Elena smiled, and it was the same smile she'd worn at the gala when she revealed her identity. Calm, certain, absolutely unafraid. I'm going to create. I'm going to design the most beautiful, honest, powerful collection of my career. I'm going to show at Fashion Week. I'm going to tell my story in fabric and thread and vision. And while you're burning through your millions on lawyers and PR firms and revenge schemes, I'm going to be making art that people will remember long after they've forgotten your name. She walked past him toward the door, box in her arms. You think fashion matters more than technology? Victor called after her. You think pretty dresses change the world? Elena stopped, looked back at him. I think beauty matters, Victor. I think art matters. I think refusing to be erased matters. And I think 50 years from now, when someone puts on one of my designs and feels powerful and seen and beautiful, that will matter more than whatever app you're building this quarter. She left him standing in the bedroom of their former life, walked out of the penthouse for the last time, and didn't look back even when she heard him shout something angry and incomprehensible behind her. The elevator ride down felt like flying. Elena drove straight from the penthouse to her studio. Victor's threat still echoing in her mind, but losing their power with every mile she put between them. When she pulled into the parking lot, she found Maria sitting on the loading dock with her laptop, surrounded by fabric samples, and what looked like every fashion magazine published in the last decade. Please tell me you didn't go back there alone, Maria said without looking up. I needed my things. You needed a witness. Victor's unhinged right now. What if he'd... Maria finally looked up and saw Elena's face. He did something, didn't he? Elena set down the box she'd been carrying and sat beside her assistant. He told me exactly what he's planning, the lawsuits, the character assassination, the systematic destruction of everything I've built. He was very thorough about it. That's literally a threat. You should tell Janet. I will, but first I want to show you something. Elena pulled out her phone, scrolling to the sketches she'd photographed last night. This is what we're making. This is my answer to Victor. Maria studied the designs, her expression shifting from concern to understanding to something like awe. These are fierce. Like Warrior Queen meets Haute Couture. When are you planning to show them? Fashion Week, New York. 8 weeks from now. Maria's eyes went wide. 8 weeks? Elena, that's impossible. We'd need at least 6 months to produce a full collection, get a venue, arrange models, publicity. We don't need a full collection. We need 12 pieces, 12 perfect, undeniable pieces that tell a complete story. Elena's voice was steady, certain. And we're not going through normal channels. I'm buying my own venue, hiring my own team, controlling every single aspect. That's going to cost a fortune. I have a fortune, and I'd rather spend it on creating something meaningful than on lawyers fighting Victor's baseless lawsuits. Elena stood, pulling Maria up with her. We have 8 weeks to build something that can't be ignored, something so powerful that no amount of legal warfare can diminish it. Are you with me? Maria looked at her for a long moment, then grinned. When have I ever not been with you? Let's make Victor Hale regret the day he underestimated his wife. The press conference the next morning was held in a sleek hotel ballroom downtown, cameras and journalists packed in like sardines. Janet had coached Elena for hours the night before, preparing her for hostile questions, teaching her to stay calm and controlled no matter what was thrown at her. Remember, Janet had said during their final prep session, you're not defending yourself. You're stating facts. You don't owe anyone an explanation for building a business before you got married. You don't owe anyone an apology for being successful. Now, standing behind a podium with microphones pointed at her like weapons and camera flashes exploding in her face, Elena understood what Janet meant. This wasn't about convincing people she was innocent. This was about refusing to be diminished. She smoothed down the jacket of her suit, a V original, naturally, in deep burgundy that photographed beautifully, and began. Thank you all for coming. My name is Elena Vasquez. Some of you know me as Elena Cross, Victor Hale's wife. Some of you know me as V, the fashion designer. I'm here today to clarify who I actually am, separate from speculation and accusation. She paused, meeting the eyes of reporters she recognized. Sarah Chen was there, front row, recorder running. So were journalists from major fashion publications, tech blogs, even a few mainstream news outlets. 4 years ago, I founded a fashion design company under the brand name V. I built that company through talent, hard work, and business acumen. I secured clients through the quality of my designs, not through deception or fraud. Every piece I created was commissioned legally, paid for fairly, and delivered with pride. A reporter raised his hand, but Elena continued speaking. 3 years ago, I met Victor Hale at a charity fundraiser. We dated, fell in love, and married 6 months later. During our entire relationship, my fashion business existed completely independently of Victor's company. I never used his resources, his contacts, or his money to build V. I kept my professional identity private for the same reason many artists use pseudonyms, to let the work speak for itself without preconception or bias. Now she paused for questions. Hand shot up immediately. Did you deliberately hide your identity from your husband? Someone called out. I maintained my privacy, Elena corrected. Victor never asked about my professional life. He assumed I spent my days shopping and socializing. I chose not to correct that assumption because my business was mine, built before him, and I wanted to keep it separate. Mr. Hale claims you married him fraudulently to steal his business connections. How do you respond? Elena's laugh was genuine. I had business connections before I met Victor. My client list includes royalty, Oscar winners, and fashion icons. I didn't need his connections. I needed nothing from him professionally. Sarah Chen spoke up. What about the allegations in the lawsuit? Mr. Hale's team claims you've been unfairly competing with his lifestyle brand initiatives. Victor's company focuses on artificial intelligence and tech solutions. I design clothes. We're not competitors. This lawsuit is retaliation for a marriage that ended badly, nothing more. Another reporter jumped in. Are you saying your husband is lying? I'm saying the facts speak for themselves. My company was established, trademarked, and operating successfully before I married Victor. All documentation is publicly available and has been provided to the court. There is no fraud, no deception, no unfair competition. There is only a powerful man angry that his wife wasn't who he assumed she was.
Do you have any regrets about how you handled the revelation at the gala? Elena considered that question carefully. I regret that a private matter became public spectacle, but I don't regret claiming my own identity. I don't regret refusing to be invisible anymore, and I don't regret walking away from a marriage where I was treated as an accessory rather than a partner. The questions continued for another 20 minutes, some supportive, some hostile, all of them documented by dozens of cameras. When Janet finally called time, Elena felt wrung out, but also strangely liberated. She told her truth publicly, calmly, without apology or defensiveness. Whatever Victor threw at her next, she'd already established the narrative. The response was immediate and divided. Social media exploded with opinions, think pieces, hot takes. Fashion industry figures rallied behind Elena almost unanimously. Designers, models, stylists, all expressing support for her right to privacy and creative independence. The tech world was more split, with some defending Victor and others condemning his obvious retaliation. But the court of public opinion didn't matter as much as the actual court. And 3 days after the press conference, Janet called with news. The judge dismissed Victor's trademark claim, called it frivolous, and noted that all evidence supports your timeline. The fraud allegations are still pending, but without the trademark angle, his case is significantly weaker. Elena felt tension she didn't know she'd been holding release from her shoulders. That's good, right? It's excellent. Victor's lawyers are scrambling. They're going to try other angles, but they're running out of legal standing. Janet paused. There's something else, something you need to know before it becomes public. Elena's stomach tightened. What? Federal investigators have been looking into Victor's company. Apparently, some of his investors raised concerns about accounting irregularities, and with all the publicity from your situation, the SEC decided to take a closer look. You think I should feel guilty about that? Elena asked carefully. No. I think you should be prepared for Victor to blame you for it, even though you had nothing to do with it. Men like him don't accept responsibility for their own problems. The federal investigation became public knowledge within hours, splashed across business news websites and tech blogs. Hale Industries' stock price dropped immediately. Investors started asking uncomfortable questions. The carefully orchestrated IPO began to look shaky, and Victor, predictably, went on the attack. He gave an interview to a major tech publication, painting himself as a victim of a vindictive ex-wife who'd somehow sicked federal investigators on him. The article was sympathetic to him, full of unnamed sources claiming Elena had always been manipulative, calculating, dangerous even. Elena read it once, then set her phone aside and went back to work. Because work was what mattered now. While Victor fought legal battles and PR wars, Elena was creating. The collection was coming together faster than she'd thought possible, each piece a perfect articulation of transformation and power. She worked 18-hour days, surviving on coffee and creative momentum, pushing herself and her small team to their limits. Maria matched her hour for hour, somehow managing both the design work and the logistics of planning a Fashion Week show without established industry connections. Richard Sterling came through, she reported one afternoon, 3 weeks into production. His daughter's wedding led to connections with 3 major fashion publicists. They all want to work with us. We have venue options in New York, models reaching out, press already interested. Richard's daughter, Elena repeated. I never did design her dress. Want me to reach out? Might be good PR. Elena thought about it. No, I want to design it because she deserves beautiful work, not because it's strategic. Tell Richard I'll reach out when this is over, when I have time to create something worthy of her. 4 weeks before Fashion Week, Victor made his final desperate move. Elena was at the studio late one night, hand-stitching details on a gown that needed to be perfect, when her phone rang. Unknown number, but something made her answer. Elena. Victor's voice, but different somehow, tired, almost defeated. We need to talk. We have lawyers for that. No lawyers, just us. 5 minutes, please. The please surprised her enough that she agreed. 5 minutes. I'm listening. Victor took a breath she could hear through the phone. The investigation is going badly. They found irregularities I didn't know about. Madeline was apparently cooking the books to inflate our valuation before the IPO. I could face charges. I'm sorry.
Elena said, and meant it. Whatever he'd done to her, she didn't want to see him destroyed. But I don't know why you're telling me this. Because I need you to make a statement. Tell the press you believe the investigation was politically motivated, that I'm being targeted because of our divorce. Your word carries weight now. It could help. Elena closed her eyes. You want me to lie for you. I want you to help me, like a wife should. I'm not your wife anymore, Victor. You made sure of that. Elena, please. I'm losing everything. The company, my reputation, my future. One statement from you could change the narrative. But she thought about all the times he'd asked her to be silent, to be small, to disappear. All the times he'd needed her to play a role for his benefit. This was just another version of the same request. No, she said quietly. I won't lie for you. I won't use my voice to save you when you spent 3 years silencing me. You made choices, Victor. You're living with the consequences. Just like I had to live with the consequences of loving someone who didn't love me back. I did love you, he said, and his voice cracked. I just didn't know how to show it. Maybe that's true, but it doesn't change anything. Goodbye, Victor. She hung up before he could respond, before she could weaken, before the part of her that had once loved him could override the part that knew better. The weeks before Fashion Week blurred together in a haze of fabric and thread and exhausted creativity. Elena barely slept, barely ate, poured everything she had into making the collection perfect. Each piece told part of the story, the cage of invisibility, the moment of revelation, the painful transformation, the hard-won freedom. The final piece, the one she'd wear herself to close the show, was a masterwork. Midnight blue silk that seemed to shift between darkness and light, structured like armor but flowing like water. It was everything she'd learned about design distilled into a single garment. It was her truth made visible. 3 days before the show, Janet called with final news. The divorce is finalized. Victor signed everything. You're officially free. Elena sat down hard, the reality of it hitting her. Just like that? His lawyers advised him to cut his losses. Between the federal investigation and the bad publicity, fighting you was becoming a liability. You get a clean break. No alimony either direction, all assets separate as they've always been. It's over. It was over. The marriage, the battle, the 3 years of being invisible. All of it finished. How's he doing? Elena asked. Victor? Badly. The investigation found enough irregularities to delay the IPO indefinitely. His board is in chaos. Madeline resigned and is reportedly cooperating with investigators to avoid charges herself. Victor's company is imploding. Janet paused. You didn't cause this, Elena. His choices caused this. Remember that. Elena did remember. But she also felt a strange sadness for the man she'd once thought he was. The person who'd never actually existed. The night before Fashion Week, Elena stood in her studio surrounded by 12 completed pieces, each one more beautiful than she'd imagined. Maria was crying openly, exhausted and proud and overwhelmed. We did it, Maria whispered. We actually did it. You did it, Elena corrected. I couldn't have made any of this without you. So what happens tomorrow? After the show? Elena thought about that. Tomorrow, she'd stand in front of the fashion world and show them who she really was. Tomorrow, the invisible wife would be gone forever, replaced by someone she was still getting to know. Someone stronger, harder, but also more honest than she'd ever been. Tomorrow we find out if the work was worth it, Elena said. If beauty and truth can matter as much as power and control. If refusing to disappear means anything in a world that profits from silence. Heavy thoughts for the night before your triumph, Elena smiled. Not triumph yet, just possibility. The venue for the show was a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, deliberately chosen to echo Elena's San Francisco studio. Instead of the traditional runway setup, she'd created an immersive experience, models moving through different spaces, each representing a stage of transformation. Guests would walk the journey with them, seeing the collection unfold as a story rather than a parade. The fashion press arrived early, buzzing with anticipation. This was the show everyone was talking about. The mysterious V finally revealing herself, the dramatic backstory, the public divorce, the federal investigation swirling around her ex-husband. Drama sold, and this had drama in spades. But Elena had been adamant with her team. The show wasn't about Victor. It wasn't about divorce or revenge or vindication. It was about transformation, about finding voice, about refusing to be diminished. As guests filed in, fashion editors, celebrities, designers, and notably Richard Sterling with his daughter, Elena waited backstage with her models. She'd chosen women of different ages, different sizes, different backgrounds. Women who'd been told they were too old, too fat, too different to be beautiful. Women who'd made themselves visible despite the world telling them to disappear. They were perfect. The show began with darkness and silence. Then, a single spotlight on a model in the first piece, a structured dress in gray that deliberately echoed the outfit Victor had chosen for Elena at the gala. The model stood frozen, trapped, invisible. Music swelled, light shifted, and the model began to move. As she walked, the dress seemed to transform, color bleeding into it, structure loosening. By the time she reached the next space, she was wearing midnight blue, standing taller, visible. The journey continued through all 12 pieces, each one showing a stage of becoming. The audience followed, silent and rapt, understanding the story Elena was telling without words. And then, the finale. Elena herself stepped into the final space, wearing the masterwork she'd spent weeks perfecting, the midnight blue gown that was armor and art, protection and proclamation. She stood in a pool of light, no longer invisible, no longer silent, completely and utterly herself. The audience erupted. Applause thundered through the warehouse, cameras flashing, people on their feet. Fashion editors were crying. Richard Sterling was clapping so hard his hands had to hurt. But Elena barely heard it. She was looking at Maria in the wings, at her team who'd worked impossibly hard, at the collection that represented everything she'd survived and everything she'd become. She'd made it, not just through the divorce, or the publicity, or the legal battles. She'd made it to the other side of invisibility. The reviews the next morning were unanimous. Vogue called it the most powerful fashion statement of the decade. Harper's Bazaar declared Elena a visionary who turned personal pain into universal truth. Even mainstream news outlets covered the show, recognizing it as more than fashion, as art, as protest, as transformation made visible. Orders poured in immediately. Clients who'd been waiting years for a V original suddenly had faces and names to attach to their requests. Elena's business manager reported that the brand's valuation had likely doubled overnight. But the moment Elena treasured most came 3 days after the show. She was in her studio, finally resting after weeks of frantic work, when Maria brought her a package. This just arrived, no return address, but the courier said it was important. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Victor's handwriting, instantly recognizable. I watched the show online. It was beautiful. You were right. What you create will outlast anything I've built. I'm sorry I couldn't see you when you were standing right in front of me. I hope you find happiness. You deserve it. V. Elena read it twice, then carefully filed it away. Not as a trophy or a vindication, but as a closing. An ending that was also, strangely, a kindness. 6 months later, Elena stood in what used to be Victor's corner office in the Hale Industries building. The company had collapsed completely after the federal investigation resulted in charges. The building and its assets were being sold off to pay settlements and legal fees. Elena had bought this office at auction. Not the whole building. She didn't need that much space. Just this room, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. She was converting it into her new design studio, turning the space where Victor had built his empire into the space where she would continue building hers. Maria walked in carrying paint samples. Still feels weird being here. It won't once we're done with it, Elena said. By the time we finish renovations, there won't be any trace of what this used to be, just what it's becoming. Kind of like you. Elena smiled. Kind of like me. Her phone buzzed, a text from Richard Sterling. My daughter's wedding is in 6 months. I know you said you'd design her dress when you had time. Do you have time now? Elena looked around the empty office, at the windows full of light, at the city spread out below. She thought about the collection that had made her famous, about the divorce that had freed her, about the 3 years she'd spent invisible and the moment she'd chosen to be seen. She thought about wedding dresses and transformation and new beginnings. "Yes," she texted back. "I have time now." Because that was the truth of it. She had time. She had voice. She had visibility. She had everything she'd built and everything she'd survived and everything she was still becoming. Victor Hale had tried to erase her, tried to keep her invisible, tried to destroy her when she refused to disappear. He'd used every weapon at his disposal: money, power, influence, legal warfare, character assassination. And he'd lost. Not because Elena had fought him on his terms, but because she'd refused to fight at all. She'd simply kept creating, kept building, kept being exactly who she was regardless of his attempts to diminish her. The billionaire had ignored his wife until she shocked everyone at a luxury party. But the story didn't end with that shock, with that revelation, with that moment of visibility. It ended here, in an office that used to belong to the man who'd tried to cage her, now transformed into a space where she could create freely. It ended with Elena standing in the light, no longer invisible, no longer silent, no longer anyone's forgotten wife, just herself, powerful, creative, undeniable, and completely, perfectly free. She picked up her sketchbook and began to draw. The next collection was already forming in her mind, new stories waiting to be told in fabric and thread. The work continued, the creation continued, and Elena, finally gloriously visible, continued forward into a future she was designing for herself.